So let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a massive, completely radical shift that is happening right this second in the U.S. Navy. We're talking about moving away from those traditional fully manned warships you're used to seeing in the movies and transitioning into an AI-driven hybrid fleet. And look, this isn't some distant science fiction anymore. It's literally happening right out on the water, and it's fundamentally changing the face of global security.
But before we get distracted by all the shiny new hardware, we really have to pause and ask ourselves the ultimate question. What actually happens when we hand the steering wheel, and let's be honest, the weapons, over to artificial intelligence? Because we are talking about the highest possible stakes here with autonomous warfare, and the answers? Well, they aren't nearly as simple as you might think.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the hybrid fleet vision, the ghost fleet and drones, connecting the nodes, the maintenance reality, AI and the moral buffer, and finally, the human element. We're going from cutting-edge naval concepts all the way down to the gritty reality of ocean maintenance and straight into some seriously deep philosophical dilemmas.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the hybrid fleet vision, reimagining naval warfare.
To really grasp this, we need to start with the big picture and see exactly how the Navy is totally reimagining how it distributes its forces. The key concept here is DMO, or Distributed Maritime Operations. This is the strategic doctrine driving the whole shebang. Because think about it. Instead of putting all their eggs in a few massive multi-billion-dollar baskets, like those giant aircraft carriers, the Navy is shifting its entire architecture. They want fewer large ships, way more small ships, and they're introducing a brand new third tier, large unmanned vehicles. The whole point is to wildly disperse their forces. It makes them so much harder for an adversary to target and allows the fleet to basically outmaneuver enemies across vast stretches of ocean, like the Pacific.
And you can see this aggressive push laid out right in the Chief of Naval Operations Navigation Plan. They are making a massive effort to operationalize robotic and autonomous systems. Basically, the Navy isn't just tinkering with these things in a lab anymore. They want to get proven autonomous systems directly into the hands of warfighters right now to build this hybrid fleet by 2027.
Which brings us to Section 2, Ghost Fleet and Drones, the new robotic vanguard.
Now, let's see how that big strategic vision actually translates into physical hardware, the so-called Ghost Fleet. And honestly, what's truly staggering here is the sheer scale and variety of these drones. We are definitely not talking about little RC boats here. Take the extra-large unmanned undersea vehicle, or XLUUV, like the Orca. This thing is the size of a literal subway car, and it's designed to covertly deploy submarine-killing mines. Then, scaling up, you have the medium unmanned surface vehicle for intelligence and surveillance. And at the very top, the large unmanned surface vehicle. We're talking 200 to 300 feet long, the size of a Corvette. It essentially acts as a giant automated maritime truck that can haul heavy strike payloads or sneak smaller drones right into contested waters. And again, this isn't just a whiteboard theory. Real-world testing is happening as we speak. Over in the Middle East, there's Task Force 59, specifically a group known as the Pioneers, Task Group 59.1. Their entire focus is getting humans and machines working seamlessly together. In fact, they recently pulled off live-fire exercises where a T-38 Devil Rays surface drone fired live munitions at a target and nailed it. Every single time. It absolutely proves that teaming human operators with a robotic vanguard can achieve incredibly lethal, reliable precision.
All right, moving on to Section 3, Connecting the Nodes, Project Overmatch, and Mosaic Warfare.
So, as impressive as all those autonomous ships are, hardware is completely useless without the digital glue holding it together. And that brings us to a highly classified initiative known as Project Overmatch. You know how you always see those military diagrams with the little lightning bolts connecting ships, satellites, and drones to show seamless communication? Well, maintaining those connections, that vital command and control when you're actually sailing into hostile territory, is incredibly tough. The fleet is constantly having to adapt to enemy sensors, electronic jamming, and weapons coverage. Just look at the stark contrast between these two environments. In a permissive environment, basically peacetime, drones and ships can spread out as much as they want. They just chat away over satellite links without a care in the world. But in a contested environment during an actual conflict, adversaries are going to actively try to jam that network. To survive, the fleet has to tighten its formation, completely minimize radio chatter so they don't get detected, and crucially, those drones have to operate with a huge amount of autonomy. If the signal goes dark, the AI literally has to take the wheel and keep executing the mission. It's an idea called mosaic warfare, highly complex operations driven by AI that can outthink the enemy even when communications completely break down. Let's switch gears with Section 4, the maintenance reality. Broken drones far from home.
Okay, we've talked up the whole high-tech sci-fi vision, but now it's time for a reality check. We need to look at the incredibly unglamorous, low-tech reality of putting these systems out in the actual ocean. There's this great quote from War on the Rocks that totally shatters the big misconception here. It says, "The medium and large unmanned surface and undersea vehicles entering the fleet are subject to the unforgiving maintenance realities of manned warships." That is a massive point. Just because it's unmanned doesn't mean it's maintenance-free. If anything, without a crew on board to fix things on the fly, it makes maintenance insanely complicated.
Think about it. Instead of fighting futuristic laser battles, the Navy's most advanced AI is currently out there battling barnacles. The ocean is just a brutally destructive environment. Navy operators are literally dealing with scraping algae off hulls, changing oil filters, and swapping out anti-corrosion anodes. And because there's nobody on board, a really simple mechanical error can spiral into an absolute logistical nightmare. Just imagine a drone popping a simple error code in the middle of the Undersea, and then having to limp 3,000 miles all the way back to Japan just for a diagnostic check. Or pulling into Singapore for a custom part, only to find out the specialized technician is stuck in customs, waiting weeks for a visa. This is the messy, incredibly physical reality of trying to sustain a robotic fleet. Which leads us straight into Section 5, AI and the moral buffer, delegating death to machines. Look, if the physical reality of maintaining these systems is a mess, the philosophical reality of armed autonomous weapons is a total minefield. And that brings us to the International Committee of the Red Cross. They've spent years digging into the fundamental ethical issues here, and they've issued some pretty stark warnings about exactly where we need to draw the line. The big question they pose is, can we really let the dictates of public conscience allow life and death decisions to just be handed over to computer algorithms? The ICRC strongly argues that human control absolutely has to be maintained if we want to comply with international law. And a really crucial concept to understand here is what's called the moral buffer. This is an actual documented psychological effect where a human operator essentially diminishes their own moral agency. They end up shifting the accountability over to the computer, treating the machine as the ultimate legitimate authority. It's a really dangerous form of automation bias. I mean, if the AI pops up and says, "Target acquired, recommend strike," the human operator might just blindly click approve because, well, the computer said so. That effectively passes the moral buck to a machine, diffusing moral responsibility in warfare. And that is a massive red flag. Let's actually walk through why this is so terrifying from a technical perspective. It's known as deep learning's black box problem. So, step 1, humans initially program the algorithm. Step 2, the system trains itself on complex data patterns. But here is the major catch in step 3. The AI actually continues to learn and adapt while it's actively deployed out in the field. That means by step 4, the decision-making process becomes a literal black box. We know the inputs going in and we know the outputs coming out, but the actual process happening inside is completely hidden from us. If the system is constantly rewriting its own parameters on the fly, it becomes inherently unpredictable. You are essentially severing the vital link between the human's original intent and the weapon's final lethal action. And that brings us to our final part, Section 6, the human element, preserving dignity in warfare. This really gets to the ultimate legal and ethical safety net governing armed conflict. And the core ethical argument here is incredibly profound. It argues that it matters not just if a person is killed or injured in conflict, but how they are killed or injured, and the actual process by which that decision is made. See, when a human soldier makes the decision to use force, there is an inherent acknowledgement of humanity and moral weight. But if you delegate that ultimate decision to a cold, lifeless machine, a lot of ethicists argue that it fundamentally undermines the human dignity of the combatants being targeted. It literally reduces life and death to a statistical algorithm. Which leaves us with this final, honestly, chilling question to think about. If human agency and moral accountability are functionally removed from the battlefield, is our humanity lost right along with it? As we rush headfirst to build these autonomous ghost fleets to secure a tactical advantage, we really have to make sure we aren't sacrificing our core human values in the process. We have to maintain meaningful human control. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I know it's a sobering topic, but it's absolutely fascinating to navigate, and I hope this sheds some real light on the realities of the hybrid fleet. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.